Welcome to InPsightRadio. I am your host, Danielle Egnew, and you are a fly on the wall to everywhere. Happy November of 2019. Here we go, belly flopping into a new month. I can't even believe how close we are to the very end of 2019. Can you even believe where this year went? I mean, what a crazy thing. Every month went flying off the table this year. I mean, 2019 has been a whirlwind of change, of evolution. It's been amazing. And on Halloween, we went into Mercury retrograde on Halloween in Scorpio. And we're going to stay in that retrograde from October 31st all the way through till November 20th. So really, the scariest thing about Halloween is that we went into a Mercury retrograde. And not only was that scary, but it was also scary that it was in Scorpio. Well, what's that mean? You know, the bullet points are this. Mercury retrograde is about finishing up old projects. It's about coming to a completion. If you've had something that's been out there that you've been working on for a long time, that's crazy. Mercury retrograde is also about looking in the rearview mirror of our life. And just don't do this while you're driving. Do it while you're parked and reflective, okay? Because Mercury retrograde is asking us, what mistakes have we made? Where in past relationship have we dropped the ball? You know, during a retrograde, a lot of times loves from the past come back around. We think getting back together with people is a great idea. We wonder if we did the right thing. Were we being too selfish in a breakup? Those are very common questions that come up during a retrograde. Also, money issues for people. Man, people will lose their ever-loving mind over money issues. And they'll wonder, what happened with my bank account and will I ever make money again? Retrogrades are a time when we not only finish up old projects, but we really do check in with ourselves to see how we've been doing really in the progress of our life. So people can get mired in a retrograde by going over the tape loop or just the sound wave loop in the head over and over of stuff they've done wrong, relationships, shoulda, coulda, woulda. Okay, retrogrades are huge shoulda, coulda, woulda timeframes, just huge. So in the middle of the shoulda, coulda, woulda, we also have this opportunity if we don't get stuck in this real big sticky pit of shoulda, coulda, woulda, we begin to say, this is a good admin time. I'm going to finish up this project. Or we might get news that a project that we've been working on for a really long time has come to a completion in a really positive way. As example, okay? So, you guys all know the TV show I'm in, The Road Angel, right? Well, The Road Angel it's amazing. We put in for a Montana film grant because we filmed the first episode, and actually the first season is being shot in Montana for the most part. And so we put this Montana film grant in, and, it was a big deal for the production company. We all worked on it, and we actually got this film grant, which may not seem like a big deal, gang, except for the fact that the entire world wants to film in Montana. And the entire world is vying for the same chunk of money that Governor Steve Bullock had set aside. So we found out that we basically were awarded the top grant amount in our category, which was resident filmmaker here in Montana, which was $50,000. The state of Montana, which is a categorically very traditionally conservative state, although really Montana's a purple state. We've got some good old boy ranchers that have been voting their daddy's party for 150 years, 200 years. And then you've got really progressive people that believe that nobody should tell them what to do. So we all kind of meet in the middle of, hey, let's have a barbecue and get along. And they call Montana the live and let live state. So that being said, it was still a pretty huge nod to our project that the state of Montana gifted us a TV show about a psychic chick who wanders the state channeling angels for people, this film grant, to work on the first season. So that was a really huge deal, yet we found that out. It was announced, I believe, November 1st. So the retrograde had already begun. And what that means is it's not like, oh no, that was awarded during the retrograde. What that means is it was a project we've been working on for 2 years. Road Angel is a show that I've been My friend Mary Erickson has been producing. I've been producing it with Mary, and we've been working on this show for 2 years. And you've heard Melissa Siana on this podcast. She was my guest the entire month of October. Melissa's the production manager for Road Angel. So this is an example of, how honored we were during this Mercury retrograde time frame to find out that the wrapping up an old project, as it were, received this funding so we can get the pilot finished and, we're going on to film the rest of the season. So it was just a really big deal. And we were so grateful because Mercury retrograde is also a time frame to have gratitude for everything that you've achieved in your life. And the people that were also applying for these grants, beautiful, amazing projects. Really, the fact that we were gifted this money is mind-boggling because the grant itself and the people who were also putting in for the grant, there were amazing artists there. So the fact that they gave it to a psychic who wanders around the outback of Montana talking to angels was pretty huge. So that is part of the tenets of Mercury retrograde, is you get to see hard work pay off during a retrograde, and people don't think of that very often. Now, this retrograde happened to be in Scorpio. So I'm just going to touch on this briefly because it leads into our topic today. However, Mercury retrograde in Scorpio is the sign that demands that we look at our inner shadows. Scorpio wants us to evaluate why we're afraid of what we're afraid of and how to get over it. That literally is what Scorpio is all about. So for Scorpio to come into our sphere and that energy during retrogrades are about us looking at past mistakes, anything that we've made that was not top notch. Plus we had the Scorpio energy there, which is pure fear and can be fear of our dark places. And if left unchecked, Scorpio out of balance becomes paranoid, isolationist, attacking, on the defense because Scorpio's just sure everybody's out to get him. This is Scorpio in its imbalanced place. That's Scorpio the Scorpion. Scorpio also has a spiritual sign of the eagle because Scorpio in its balanced place can see the entire landscape and it completely understands the connection and the role that darkness has within us as a teacher. Rather than a threat, Scorpio in its eagle position sees darkness as a teacher, right? So we had this Halloween, which was Mercury retrograde, which really has us looking in the mirror in the first place. Then it has Scorpio on top of it, which is saying, are all those past failures real now? Are all those past wounds happening now? Is every crappy thing that's ever happened to you in the past going to happen again? And then the Scorpio aspect asks us, are you going to react in this moment of feeling like this fear that you're feeling is actually real in the body? Are you going to actually bring it forward into the third dimension and make it real? In other words, Scorpio would sit on that Mercury retrograde and say somebody was cheated on, okay? Then all of a sudden you might be feeling like your partner, for whatever reason, is cheating. And you have no freaking idea why, but you're pretty sure they're cheating. And oh my God, all of a sudden this big weird freak out happens and you can feel it in your body. This Scorpio aspect of the retrograde brings it into your flesh and your heart's racing and the chemicals in your brain are firing, just like you found out that you've been cheated on. Only this is only happening in your head. Okay? Do you see how this retrograde works? So then you freak out and you grab your phone and you text your partner, you rotten SOB, I can't believe you cheat on me again. And your partner's at work and gets this cray text and they think, what in the hell? Are you hitting the bottle at 2 p.m.? What's going on here? Because this crazy text hits their phone. So I'm setting all of this up because many of us have a lot of issues that are coming to a head at the end of 2019, okay? And this is a big deal. This year, coming into this reconstructive year, we're having to tear down our own scaffolding and figure out what our deal is in this year. And if we haven't done it yet, then Mercury retrograde in Scorpio on Halloween during the most thin ether time frame ever, which means that any fear-eaten thing that goes bump in the night can come by and say amen to any freak out you're having and throw gasoline on that fire on an energetic level. We are literally being asked what we believe right now. Do you believe it? Do you believe this to be true? And why? Why did this crazy retrograde hit on Halloween? Why? And I really didn't focus on it on the Halloween episode just because I didn't want to freak anybody out unnecessarily. Yet we can roll through this retrograde and we're going to be feeling its shadow period extra long because of the thin ether aspect plus the nature of Scorpio, which likes to evaluate the dark to decide how much of a teacher it continues to be in our life. So this Mercury retrograde in Scorpio over Halloween, its shadow period, usually a shadow period, you guys, is like, I don't know, gang, like 5 days to 7 days. This is kind of going to be almost 2 weeks on either side. So here we're sitting, in the first week of November, and we're still feeling the ripples from that retrograde. And this was the longest shadow period into a retrograde that I had ever felt in my life. I'm not kidding you. It was rough. I was getting massive waves of panic, paranoia. I was looking at my wife thinking I was having some perimenopausal meltdown half the time. I'm like, what is wrong with me? I am so steeped in fear right now. I feel like my brain chemistry just spread its butt cheeks and took a crap on my head. What is going on? And that started about 2.5 weeks before the retrograde, So it's been a crazy time frame. And let me tell you, if you are going through struggling with some of these illusions of fear that your body is sure are real and you are having physical responses to them, like a racing heart and a racing mind and all of these freakouts, if this is something that's actually happening to you right now, make sure to take a few steps back and ask yourself, is this really real? Is this actually happening? Or am I actually being cheated on? Or do I just think I'm being cheated on? You see how that rolls around? So it's going to feel real. You're going to feel like Luke Skywalker in the second Star Wars movie where he walks into that cave. Remember that cave he was on? What was it? What planet was that? He was with Yoda and he was training. The infamous scene where Yoda pulls the X-Wing fighter out of the swamp with his mind, with the Force. And there's old angry Luke, and he's training to be a Jedi, and he looks off into the bramble, and he's feeling a vibe coming from some dark, weird, swampy corner. And he says, Yoda, what's over there? And Yoda explains that there are parts of the world that have the light force and parts of the world that have the dark force, and there's a concentration of the dark force over there. So, of course, Luke is really intrigued because we love our spooky stuff. So he just wanders over to where the dark force is. And it's a cave. And Luke says to Yoda, what's in the cave? And Yoda says, whatever you bring in with yourself. And so I'm kicking off our main topic today with that story because fear and what we think is happening and what we know in our bodies having a fear response, our chemistry in our brain is firing off. We've got adrenaline and we're freaking out. Fear can be one of the most misleading physical sensations that we can have if it is strictly coming from a place of psychological fear. Now, obviously, sometimes fear is very healthy. And I have people in the psychological field who get upset when I start talking about this because they don't listen to the end of the point, which is that psychological fear is something that we're afraid of that exists only in the head, and it's not actually even occurring to us at that moment. It's like we're living in a prison in our mind, and we're reacting to everything we're feeling as if it were actually happening in that moment. And actually, the psychological community can also call that a delusion, okay? Yet the minute we call it a fear, it's okay. Well, it's okay that I'm sitting here worrying all night long that I'm going to starve and die at the end of the month because I'm never going to be able to pay my bills, even though I have the same exact amount of money every month and every month the bills get paid. But I'm going to sit here and have a physical reaction to my mental state that's claiming I'm going to die, and now I'm wigged out and sobbing. That's psychological fear. That's something that's not actually happening, but you cooked it up in your noggin, and by God, you're pretty sure you're going to die of it, okay? Then there's biological fear, which is encoded in our DNA, and I talk about that a lot. And that's like, wow, I'm seeing a bear. I'm afraid of that. Or wow, this person in this alley is deciding to act really weird and aggressive. I need to get the heck out of here. Biological fear is a whole different thing. So we're talking about the effect of psychological fear on a person. And during this ascension time frame, we are being confronted with our fears like crazy. And we're being asked, is the physical sensation that you're feeling that was drummed up by the psychological fear that was so incredible in your brain that your brain just unleashed all these chemicals to say, oh yeah, that's actually happening. Is it real? Is it real? And our first impulse is to defend our physical reaction, isn't it? It's to say, yes, it's real. Of course it's real. My heart is palpitating. I'm freaking out. Of course it's real. Okay, but what are you afraid of? Well, I'm afraid that the government's collapsing and they're going to come and take my guns and everything is horrible and it's turning into socialist and the whole thing is tanked and it's god awful and blah, blah, blah. And then you say, but nobody's taking your guns and socialists aren't taking the country over. And what in the frickin' hell are you talking about? But that person is now living in an alternate dimension of fear where this is actually happening to them. So it's important to remember that our brain doesn't know the difference, gang, between what's really happening to us and what we imagine happens to us. And that's where post-traumatic stress and other affects of the mind, which are psychological fear imprints, can be debilitating. So I'm not suggesting that if you experience psychological fear, you're some weak person that doesn't understand metaphysics. Not at all. I'm simply pointing out that oftentimes, if you're an individual who hasn't suffered with experiences that would produce an actual clinical post-traumatic stress response, okay, if you're somebody that actually doesn't have that in your trunk of experiences, then it is oftentimes to your best interest to step back and say, is this real? Or is this just what I've whipped up in my head? So when we're talking about this ascension time frame, where people don't even know what it means. They don't. They some people think that the world is just going to instantly get puffy and awesome, and none of us are going to have to do any heavy lifting, and it's just great, and everything just snaps to, and it's fantastic. Now, that could actually happen if we had enough of our human population on board with the same desire to bring peace and connectivity. That's totally possible, gang. Okay? So I'm not saying it's not possible. What I'm saying is that currently, when I look out into our ascension time frame and what's happening with our ascension time frame, and I look at these angels and they talk to me about what's going on with our ascension time frame, what I'm getting a chance to see here is that one of the exercises that we are putting ourselves through right now in an attempt to see if we want to remain in a place of fear or not, or limitation or not, is to literally physically embody all of our deepest fears and let our brain run rampant. And it's tough because we've got to decide whether those fears are true. And it's so interesting because I noticed that these fear cascades happen in people right before something exquisite happens in their life. And if you're a traditional Bible-thumping Christian person, you're going to call that an attack of the enemy. You're going to say that the devil knows that God is going to bring you something amazing. So therefore, the devil is testing you by sending you fear to see if you will bite on the fear or if you will be patient, wait on God, and receive the gifts of the Spirit. Okay, that's what a very traditional Christian person would call this time frame. A less traditional person might look at that and say, well, what's going on? If you are someone who follows, well, honestly, physics, there is no linear time, gang. I know, that's weird, but it's true. There is no 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. We have developed time pieces to break down and quantify the rotation of the earth and the big ball in the sky raising and setting at night. And then the small ball coming up and setting at night, we've developed a system of marking that. But when the way that we think about time, there actually is no time. It's a construct that we use for coordination and to record big historical lumps and all kinds of other things. So when you look at this, that means that your future, your present, and your past are all happening in a line. Not, okay, well, my past is back there and my future's up here. I want you to think of you marching in a line. Like the soldiers, remember the red coats and the blue coats back in, the American Revolution? So you've got a line of soldiers and you are all marching across the field. And to the left of you is your past. To the right of you is your future. But notice there's not 3 of you. There may be 200 of you. So there are tons of versions of you in the past that are existing at the same time in your memory, in your feelings, sometimes in a post-traumatic stress response. And then there are dozens and hundreds of you existing in the future on the same plane, marching as you're marching. Now, the ones in the future already know that this amazing thing is going to happen for you, okay? The future you already knows that you're going to win the lottery. The future you already says, wow, this is so fun to be in season 5 of Road Angel. The future you says, I'm so happily married to the partner of my dreams, and I have a spouse that loves me. The future you says, wow, I got that job that I absolutely loved that I never thought I would get. That's the future you, okay? Now, that causes a ripple down the line. So I want you to think of all your soldiers marching across that field in a straight line, and the future you that is aware of all these amazing things that are coming ripples. Like imagine everybody's holding hands, right? And they do the wave down the line. So they all do the wave and it gets to you in the present, or what you recognize or cognitively can process as the present. So here comes this wave and it ripples through you. And all of a sudden, you're feeling yourself with $14 million, or you're feeling yourself with the perfect person, or you're feeling your perfect job, or you're feeling that perfect season 5 of your TV show, or you're feeling whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, you realize, wait, where did that come from? Because I'm still here and I work at the Tasty Freeze. I work at the gas station. I haven't met anybody. And then all of a sudden, we get this horrible freak out that just pours on the top of our head of fear. Oh my God, I'm never going to meet anybody. I'm never going to feel that sensation. I'm never going to have that job that I got so excited about. Oh my God, none of this is going to happen. Well, screw it. I should just quit my job right now and just go run away to a third world country where I can actually afford to live on $5 a week. And I'm just out of here. I can't do it anymore. I just can't do it anymore. Because we felt what it felt like, and it was majestic, then recognized it wasn't happening right now. And then we emotionally crapped our pants. Okay, so this is how this works through timelines. So a very Bible-honoring person might look at that and say, well, that's the devil tempting you to see if you'll stay faithful to the plan of God, which is another way of saying your temporal self, who exists in all timelines at one time, which is actually what's going on if we look at physics, gang, if we look at all the macro physics out there, all of it, that's what's happening. So if you're in that line and you feel those incredible things and you get afraid, then really what you're experiencing is success, yet not knowing how to handle the success in your current state. So instead you get afraid that you'll never have this success, when really your future self is trying to shout down the chain and do the old wave through all your soldiers till it gets to you. They're trying to say to you, hey, guess what? This is coming. Keep walking forward, because pretty soon the wave's going to get to me and I can take over for us. Okay? But then pretty soon your perception, you're going to be the person in the past. Now all of a sudden you're the person to your left. Okay, so you were the present person, but now you're moving forward to the person who gets the lottery check. You're moving to the right of your line, but you're all marching forward at the same time. So the same person who is the present person is now part of your past, and that person is a memory. And you're remembering, oh, I remember that time I never thought I'd win the lottery. That's so weird, because now I'm the present me and I am experiencing the lottery win. And pretty soon, we're going to be experiencing something farther down the chain. You see how this works? So when we feel like the junk is going to hit the fan at the last minute, what we're feeling incredible, powerful, good things coming in from the future. That's what we're feeling. And we're just not sure how to interpret that in our present, which pretty soon is going to be our past. Okay. So when you feel something coming in that is so magnificent and you get really excited, and you're excited for a little while, but then you start to feel really down about it, and then you're getting really depressed and really angry. Gang, that whole process is us trying to make sense in the present version of that one soldier in the line that's marching forward. That one soldier is trying to make sense of only part of the action plan. That version of you only has part of the action plan. This is what a traditional Christian person might say. You need to have faith that the rest of it's going to come in. Somebody who doesn't believe in that modality of thought can easily look at the fact that we are surrounded by multiverses. This is string theory. This is M theory. This is Einstein and Stephen Hawking. So we are surrounded by these multiverses, which have different versions of us doing different things at different times, which is why we can have what a dear friend of mine called lateral memories, which is remembering like a vision of something you swore you did, but obviously you've never been to that country or you've never eaten that food, but you remember it so clearly. Well, it's because a version of you is there doing that right now. So when we think about the ascension and we think about the troubles that we have and why it's hard and how much of fear that we struggle with, what we're dealing with is understanding that for the human race to go to its next phase, its next survivable incarnation. Now, notice I said survivable because we'll probably, even if 4 or 5 of us trickle out of all this climate change, we'll still survive. Yet, if we are to make a mass survivable leap in our evolution as a society, we must absolutely change up our relationship with fear. And it's hard because fear is taught to us oftentimes by very well-meaning adults trying to keep us safe, or sometimes accidentally by careless adults who are leaving us to feel frightened and giving us no explanation. And so a lack of information in a human being equals fear, because that could mean that our survival is threatened. So if we're really going to work together as a species to get through the next 5 years, which are going to be pretty change-worthy for those of us that have been on the planet a while. I've been on the planet 50 years now. And the next 5 years are going to be very different. We're going to have to make all kinds of conscious changes as a society about how we choose to actually interact with one another. And this is going to be huge because we've been taught that fear protects us. And in this ascension process, people are finding that the ascension process is painful for them. I mean, painful from a perspective of emotional release to sometimes physical issues to massive anxiety that people are going through. And we talked a little bit about that at the first part of the show. I mean, the ascension process it doesn't have to be painful, but for many people, it oftentimes is. Because one of our biggest, I guess I would say, teachers at this phase of our ascension process is fear. And just like we were talking about at the top of the podcast, a Mercury retrograde in Halloween in Scorpio, okay? And I say in Halloween because it was happening in that thin ether time frame. That's really going to bring our fear forward. And it's going to ask us, are you really going to carry this over to 2020? Or are you really ready to give away that panic button that you think has kept you safe? Because let's just talk about that. And again, obviously, gang, we don't need to go on and on about situations where our fear helped us out of a rotten situation because we could tell something was wrong in our gut. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about concocting something fearful in the mind because the devil we know is better than the devil we don't know. And if we just concoct this horrible, terrible thing in our head, get it over with, get our crappy response over with, get our hurt over with, pull the Band-Aid off, we can control the amount of pain that we're in. As opposed to having hope, getting out there, getting our hopes up and having something shift, having a disappointment hit us, having the wind knocked out of our sails, and then we feel out of control. And then we try to peddle the ideology of false hope, which isn't even a thing. I mean, hope by the very nature of what it is, gang, it can't be false. It is about planting seeds, building bridges, and weaving timelines together. That's the energy of hope. So you can't falsely do that. I mean, we can delude ourselves. That's different than having false hope. So whenever anybody says, do you feel like you're giving false hope to people? I have to laugh because there is no such thing as false hope. So there you go. So this ascension being painful for some people really does come down to some pretty tough love stuff, gang, okay? I mean, it gets a little gritty at this portion of the podcast because if we are really attempting to go through the ascension process and you're part of the human race, which most of us are, then that's going to mean that fear has been a really prominent teacher for you since you were born. And especially if you came out of the 20th century, that was where they kept people in line. We're seeing this new version of McCarthyism kind of float forward that's being propagated by the far right. And I don't even want to say the Republican Party. It's just a weird, fringy weirdness, this far right that's coming forward and saying that everybody's a socialist if they don't agree with them. And of course, God forbid we ever talk about a different modality of government besides our democratic republic, which people can't even get right because they call us a democracy. We're actually a democratic republic. Yet I digress. So here we are in this society where now we're going through the new McCarthyism, which is if you don't agree with me, you're a socialist. And we're just going to say you're anti-American. And that's what McCarthy did, only it was communism. And so what's so weird about this is there is opportunity for the far left to turn around and say, well, everybody who doesn't agree with me is a neo-Nazi white supremacist. And there's been some flirts with the far left with that. However, for some reason, that has not become, probably because it's inane, that hasn't become a main battle cry for the more mainstream Democratic Party, I guess. For some reason, the more mainstream Republican Party has allowed itself to take on this name calling. And I'm not saying the Democrats don't call names. Oh, come on. They both call names to each other. It's terrible. However, what I'm talking about is the fear propagation. And so going through this association with our fear as a teacher, as opposed to an identity, is really different. Because what if I am that God and country person, okay? What if, honest to God, I really believe that my country is under attack from some weird modality that I've been taught. Now, remember, I've been taught this is anti-American, and it means that it's disassembling the greatest republic ever to be on the earth, because that's what I believe, because we have to deal with people's constructs of belief, right? If I really believe this is going on, and I believe that someone is a socialist and the socialists are trying to take over, that fear is going to push me into a very aggressive position. And I'm going to come out swinging. I'm going to come out hating those people. I'm going to come out pushing back on them. I don't even want to hear them as people, because now all they are is an ideology that I must smash because I believe that it threatens my survival. Okay? And conversely, we go way to the far left, way over there, and we've got people looking at just somebody who wants to balance a budget in Washington. And that person is looking at the balance budgeter, calling them a white supremacist and calling them a neo-Nazi. And the person balancing the budget is like, I just want to make sure we're not spending $1 million on a toilet seat. What the hell is your problem? But now I've decided that the $1 million on a toilet seat watchdog is trying to take all of the civil rights away from my country. And now I hate them. And I have to rail against their ideology because I'm afraid. I'm afraid they're going to take away from what I see as God and country, which is freedom, which is expression of the self, which is have as many marching down the street rallies, complain and do your thing and bring amazing change, be a grassroots organizer. That's my America, right? Well, as you can see, fear polarizes and it creates division and chaos. So for us to ascend, to go into the Ascension timeframe, means that we give away the identities that we've forged in ourselves that are the fearful, crouching for the other shoe to drop. Because I will guarantee you, gang, we are on the universe. We're not on the other end of the universe. Okay, the universe is on the other end of us. And this is what any religious or spiritual book, if you read it, talks about. Yes, there is in Christianity, in Judaism, in Hinduism, really in Islam, there is especially, we'll take Hinduism out of that because they're a polytheistic society. However, the monotheistic religions have this being that's actually trying to get a point across to us that if we get along, things will be better. That's literally it. I mean, the Old Testament is a kind of a jacked up version of the Torah in the Jewish religion, and there's not even a hell in the Torah. I mean, the Jews were not wandering around going, you better do this or you'll go to hell. I mean, that wasn't even happening, and I love my Jewish friends because they giggle and they're like, you people who associate with Christianity, man, you and your hell, that gets butts in the seats. Why didn't we think of that? That gets a lot of butts in the seats. Wow. And we joke about it because it's funny. Because there is no actual hell reference in the Bible. There was one that was created from a misinterpretation, but Jesus wasn't saying, you're going to be sent underground and cook with the devil. That wasn't ever in there. But anyway, again, I digress. So you can see how fear gets played out with so many faces. And if we're going to ascend, and if we're going to become the most amazing superhero version of humanity, we got to dump this fear, gang. I mean, for those of you that struggled through this Mercury retrograde on Halloween that was happening in Scorpio, I want you to think about how real that fear felt, right? I mean, and listen, I went through it too. I'm generally a pretty happy individual. I'm not saying I don't have my bummer days, okay, but I'm generally pretty happy. Yet I looked at this fear inside of me, gang, and it was insane. I mean, it was so irrational. And I remember saying to myself, Danielle, what is going on? Which prompted me to ask the angels, and they said, that which into the stars is born. And I'm like, that which into the stars is born? And then I thought of A Star is Born, but they were not telling me to watch a movie. They were showing me that this is an astrology issue that's helping us air our own personal shadows, inner demons, what we think is our dirty laundry, anything we associate shame with, and get it out there before we cross the 2020 barrier. So if you are struggling, if you're struggling this year with fear and a feeling of hopelessness, first of all, know it's this affect of the retrograde in Scorpio, and it's probably not real, okay? It's probably not real. Just evaluate it as a teacher. And if we're going to ascend, we have got to figure out a way how not to react to the fear. Why? I will direct everybody back to the mind-bending, box office breaking Hollywood film The Matrix, which was released in 1999. Everybody who wants to have a little personal experiment with the self this week, dial up The Matrix and watch it again. Because you're going to say, well, I already know what happens in The Matrix. Well, sure you do. But 20 years ago, that film had a very different impact. And you're going to watch it now and say, oh my God, that's about the Ascension time frame. Because it is. And if you remember, Neo at the end, right? Keanu Reeves, who looks about 14 years old in this movie. It is so weird. But anyway, so Keanu Reeves, of course, is Neo, is in this matrix, which is just a computer construct of reality that all human beings are plugged into. And at the end, he gets command over his fear, and he sees the computer code. He sees the matrix for what it actually is, rather than what he thought it was, because he came out of the fear. And he came out of assigning value to what was around him. You know, the infamous Matrix quote, "There is no spoon." There is no spoon. Remember that? He wanders into this apartment to talk to the Oracle, and there's this head-shaven little kid sitting on the floor who's bending a spoon with his mind. And Keanu says, "How do you do that?" And he says, "Well, there is no spoon. That's why." So the spoon gets to be whatever you want it to be. And that movie is, in my opinion, the most brilliant weave through of name a religious or spiritual thought process, in addition to putting it in a way that people would understand, in addition to actually launching it in a time frame where 20 years ago we were watching this and it was planting seeds to get to the time frame that we're at now. That film is one of the most profound illustrations of what I'm talking about when I say that the universe is on the other end of us. We are not on the other end of the universe. Now, I'm not trying to say we're all God, okay? I'm not trying to say that we're all this omnipotent being, yet in a way, we kind of are. Because when we pull together, we become this amazing planner array for miracles. And so if humanity is going to make it through this ascension time frame, then one of the things that we really have to do is not only get away from the fear as our first reaction, yet the ability to be able to understand that we're rewriting our code as fast as our subconscious and our conscious mind can tickety it on our keyboard in our minds, just like the Matrix, and then step back and watch the world shift around you after you recode your expectations for the scene, the outcome, whatever. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily be able to just rub the genie lamp and get absolutely every pony you ever wanted, and maybe it does. Yet we are also, gang, we are also contending with every other person, almost 8 billion of us, rewriting their code in that moment. So if we can write code that's based on love, unification, wellness for all, abundance for all, everybody having enough, everything just being okay, and we can come at our, pursuits from that perspective, then the code is going to get accepted into the mainframe a lot easier because it's not fighting against 7 point whatever billion other programs that are trying to run in the same matrix at the same time. Does that make sense? So the ascension can be painful because in our ascension process, we don't know how to actually code our path. We don't know how to write that new code and to be Neo and just see it for what it is. We're still reacting to what we think is imminent reality. And that's something I would tell everybody. You know, the ascension can be painful because it also means letting go of what we thought our reality was. You know, I can't tell you, I know so many folks that are sadly in partnerships or marriages that are just worn out. And I don't mean that in a non-compassionate way. I mean, they're with somebody who maybe they fell in love with when they're 18, now they're 50. They've both lived separate lives. They have children together. Not to say you need to ditch your person that you got when you were 18. It's to simply say that sometimes our walk with someone was to bring us a certain portion of ourself, and then it's time to move on. Or sometimes we're going to be with that person till we take our very last breath. You know, it just depends on what our soul walk is. Yet I know a lot of people who stay in jobs, relationships, really churches sometimes, that don't fit them anymore. But at that point, it's their identity. It's their T-shirt. It's their bumper sticker. You know, I'm the evangelical. I'm the Catholic. I'm the Jewish person. I'm the Buddhist. I'm the Taoist. Although the Taoists don't really go down this road, but I just had to say that because it was funny. You know, and even a true Buddhist doesn't even really believe there's a thought because we're all one thing and we're all something else's thought. So that's awesome. However, the point being that we've got to give away our fear to ascend, and sometimes that fear is our identity. You know, who am I going to be if I'm not the wife or husband of so-and-so? Who am I going to be if I'm not the head of the company or the policeman or the teacher or the doctor? You know, our our identity is what we do, at least in modern America. And it really, the ascension process, or what ascension is about letting who you are be enough. So we've got to let go of this fear of changing, this fear of transforming. When you think about a butterfly, it's sitting there in its chrysalis, and I doubt very much that, well, maybe it is in there thinking, oh my God, this is cramped and I can't wait to get out. But we think about this. We think, how do I get out of my tight, closed quarters as I've been in here with my own fear? And I think there's a point to where that butterfly, that chrysalis, comes to butterflyness, and that consciousness hits it. And I'm guessing there's got to be a little bit of a panic in there, because that's a really tight set of cocoon you're in. And it's the struggle, of course, we all know the story. It's the struggle that makes the butterfly's wings, get all the different fluids pumped down to them. So when we talk about ascension, we're talking about leaving behind, or shedding, or shelling off, or coming out of a fear modality that defined who we are. And that can be painful. I know amazing people, smart, incredible people in my life that choose to remain in fear states because they choose the fear as a motivator. They feel that hatred can be righteous and it fuels them for their work. And they and I have had a lot of chats about, hey, look, there's no such thing as righteous hatred. Yet when we're talking about ascension, what we're talking about is leaving behind a modality of separation where people can come together and begin to operate by writing code into the mainframe, where that code begins to bring back miracle potential. And I'm using the word code, obviously, gang. That's a euphemism for, you want to call it manifestation, you want to call it positive right action, you want to call it getting your head in the game. Energy goes where thoughts flow. That is a very common bumper sticker metaphysical saying out there, and it's true. So if I'm somebody who is, chronically focusing on everything negative in my life, then I'm going to live a negative life. If I'm somebody chronically focusing on everything good in my life, then I'm going to notice the good things. And good things happen to bad people. And yes, of course, wild cards happen. Yet the product of this idea of ascension, what is the ascension timeframe? It means that we are getting rid of an old, outmoded operating system that doesn't work, and we're getting rid of our fears of who we used to be. And we're actually getting rid of the fears that we aren't enough. We're throwing shame to the curb, and we're stepping out in a time frame saying, hey, my identity might have been the doctor, yet I'm also a human being, and I love dancing, and I love volunteering at the homeless shelter, and I love collecting weird stamps. Bringing the fullness of who we are into this time frame is really also about giving away the fear. Because how many of us out there, come on now, be honest, it's just you and me and whatever little space in your home car or personal operating device that this podcast is taking up. So it's just between you and the universe here, and maybe me, but I promise not to listen. How many of you out there keep parts of you deeply hidden? Now I'm not talking about parts that probably shouldn't be there, like, oh, I'm a secret serial killer, or you may want to seek professional help for that, or go see some law enforcement about that issue. I'm talking about just normal stuff, though, gang. Non-series Dexter sociopathic issues here. How many of us out there keep huge pieces of us hidden because we feel it will defy our identity, and we are afraid of losing what we've worked for so hard? I didn't come out of the closet forever when I was coming out of the closet as a psychic. I came right out as a gay woman, but not as a psychic, not as an angelic channel, not as somebody who translates energies. I was too afraid of, at that time, I was a signed musician, so I was too afraid of losing my identity as the rock star, and that people would make fun of this most personal part of me because I was the rock star. So I was afraid. I was flat up afraid, and I denied it, and I denied it, and I would flat up lie to people. I would know things about their life, and people would say to me, how do you know that? And I would lie to protect my fear. I would say, oh, we talked about that. And they would say, no, I've never told anybody about that. And this is back in my 20s and 30s. So I could get away with saying, oh, sure you did. Yeah, we partied together and you told me your whole life story. And that'll work to a certain degree with certain people who maybe do have a cocktail or two. They're like, God, did I tell you that? Maybe, I don't know. Because people would just tell me stuff. So there was a period that I lied about who I was because I was afraid that I would lose the identity that I worked so hard for. And being a female musician, gang, coming up in the early 90s to the mid 90s, I mean, you were enduring horrible treatment, and hopefully it's better, but who even knows? Especially being told you needed a boob job, and would you give this person a sexual favor, or you can't go forward. I mean, it was just blatant in the music industry, just horrible. So I wasn't going, I still have all my stock equipment. There's no boob job. I never slept with anybody to get anywhere. So I was so afraid to lose the ground that I had covered. It was so hard to cover that ground without really, going low, no pun intended, that I just lied. So I'm not saying I've never done it. I'm saying that as we go into this time frame, instead of me back in the day saying, well, actually, your angels are telling me your whole life story, and I'm really compelled to help you with this because it's my design. And oh, by the way, I play guitar and sing. I had to act like I just knew something about somebody randomly. I was a super good guesser. I had a million one-liners about why I knew so much about people, their lives, and their futures. And that's a lot of work, gang. And to lie that much is a lot of work. So if we're going to go into an ascension time frame, the big thing that we've got to do is get real with ourselves and others. And we don't have to get grotesquely real. We don't have to disclose parts of ourselves that we're still working on coming to terms with. Yet we can put the little baby steps out there. We can start to let people know that we have gifts and talents, or that we're afraid of certain things, or that we don't know half of what we've convinced the world that we do know. We lie so much in our American culture because our American culture has been balanced and really imbalanced, actually. But it's been built upon this supposed balance of the imbalanced patriarchal. So it's a lot of bluffing. It's a lot of poker plays. It's a lot of, sticking your chest out and faking it till you make it. And the ascension time frame isn't going to let us fake a dang thing. Not a dang thing. And we've got to be okay with coming to grips with our darker pieces. And by darker, I'm not meaning evil, gang. Half the time, the dark stuff we have inside of ourselves is just shame. It's shame. And we're not letting the shame rotate into the lesson as the teacher to tell us how to have compassion with ourselves, to explain that it was the best we could do at the time. Sometimes we carry shame for something that someone else did to us. Victims of sexual abuse. And they feel so ashamed of what happened. And those folks, really, I had a really good friend of mine who's also a psychologist who put it forward saying that there's nothing to be ashamed of if you were molested or sexually abused, because that's not something you did with someone. That's something that's done to you. It's like being ashamed of being shoved off a building. I mean, you didn't ask for that. It just happened. So as we learn to dismantle the shame within us, we take away a lot of the fear. And as we take away a lot of the fear and we just get real with ourselves and others and say, I don't know. Here's a good one, everybody. Besides the Matrix, this week, when you go into your week, decide to, if you don't know something, watch how many times you are compelled to bluff through it, because that is the imbalanced patriarchal, where there is this unrealistic idea of the superhero male, or that many women tried to be the superhero male during that time frame. And that superhero male can jump over buildings in a single bound. They are bulletproof. They know everything. And so people learned to lie in America. Oh, sure, I go to church 1 million times a week. Oh, sure, I make this much money. Oh, yeah, I've had that job experience. Little white lies float the poker bluff that is known as consumerism. Consumerism is floated by myth makers that, hey, buy this product, you'll lose 50 pounds. We're talking about a heavily indoctrinated society globally, of course, and I'm, of course, talking about the United States of America. Yet in the Western culture, especially in America, We've been taught to lie. And so this is why we really resonate when somebody has some integrity and comes forward and says, I don't know the answer to that question. Let me get back to you on it. Oh my gosh, that's great, because guess what? I don't know either. So we'll all learn it together. So it can be painful to be in this ascension time frame. We've got to look at how much we've lied to ourselves. We've got to look at how much we've potentially lied to other people in that lying to ourselves. We get to look at how many roles we've played because we thought we needed to do that because we needed the validity of that person in the world. We got to come out of the mainframe, begin to write our own code by helping out, stepping outside the box, volunteering places we normally wouldn't, spending meditative time to literally, if you have to think of a computer keyboard in front of you and you are typing out, even if you don't know HTML or Java or any of it, and you're typing out code to go ahead and make you're writing your life. You're writing your life. And that's what the feminine time frame is waiting for from you. That's what the ascension is about. And for those of us that study religious history, I'm a huge religious history buff. I love it. A lot of my studies that I've done have been the history of how the Christian religion even got going, because I was raised, evangelical and Italian Catholic and all these different Christian-based religions. Yet, they're all fascinating, whether it's Hinduism or any of them. It's super fascinating. And one of the things that I see when I'm looking into these religious ways of doing things is there is always a point, whether it's the Quran, whether it's the Bible, whether it's the Torah, there's always a point where the all-knowing universal consciousness known as God, or the God figure, is asking someone to stop struggling. Stop struggling against everything. Just be what I made you to be. You're enough. You're cool. And what's fascinating about this is then we've had so many versions, especially of Christianity, that have come forward and said, oh, just kidding, you're pretty much a sinner and you're terrible and everything about you sucks and you can never be one with God until you blah, blah. Because we realize that what? Fear sells. Fear represses, and fear keeps people separate. And then we really, in old world religion, we really hit the shame button, man. It was like a whack-a-mole of shame, just whack, 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 whack. Every inner fear anybody had was getting the mallet just pounded on top of it. So everybody had these inner caverns of quiet, hushed, locked away darkness. And the darkness was trying to be a teacher. The shame was trying to teach you that you're doing the best you can. And again, as we go into this ascension time frame, we can replace shame with accountability and right action and acceptance. And really, that takes the shame out. So our ascension does not have to be culturally as painful as it may feel. So try this on. Try these spiritual physics on. Just accept what you are. Accept who you are. Say, I don't know, or I'm scared, or gosh, that made me feel really sad. Go back to that inner 5-year-old and bring that person forward. Do your best to come out of that consumerist brainwashing that says you have to be shiny and amazing and never make a mistake, or you'll lose your credibility. I'm talking about being human here, gang. I'm not talking about going and doing something foolish with a 30-year career that's academic or anything. I'm talking about bluffing. And it's hard to be ourselves. Now, it's much less hard for millennials who came in with that spiritual lesson of totally being themselves and completely not understanding why the world would not meet them in the middle. Like for them, that just blew their ever-loving minds, So what I would tell you here is that the ascension can be painful if we are stuck in the cycle of engaging all of our shadows and all of our fears and all of our limitations as the sum total of what we have to work with as we rewrite our code in this new mainframe. And that's why Mercury retrograde on Halloween in Scorpio has been one of our most incredible healers that we've had come to us in this year. Seriously. So if you're feeling down, if you're feeling out, if you're feeling like you just have been under a weight of bricks, that you have anxiety for no reason, sit down quietly, even if you can write it out and tell yourself the truth. Maybe the truth is you're scared that you never achieved what you thought you would in your life. Maybe the truth is you achieved a whole bunch and you don't think you deserve it. That's called imposter syndrome. And the imposter syndrome is tough because if you are doing the good work and the work is coming to you and you're doing it and you still feel like an imposter, well, obviously, if you're helping people, you're not an imposter. But because of this weird old world modality that demands that the shame and the fear get the spotlight, then we don't even accept that we've done something beautiful for other people. And imposter syndrome is tough. It's tough for people. And I know a lot of people, very famous, very powerful people, that you would probably be shocked to hear that they struggle from imposter syndrome. And part of that is because they haven't been entirely forthcoming with themselves, or maybe with the world, or whatever is necessary, about the shadows that are trying to teach them their greatest capabilities and strengths. And I'm not talking, gang, when you hear me talk about shadows, I am not talking about self-indulgence and getting into the 9-month-long pity pot and oh, poor me. And we can take our shadow evaluation way too far. And it's very interesting, just to kind of wrap this up. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a mental health professional, and we were talking about this epidemic of everybody having a label these days. Maybe they're depressive, or they're anxiety, or it's anxiety 1, 2, or 3, or it's this or it's that. And I'm not saying that folks don't struggle from these things. These are real issues, people. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that a lot of times this mental health professional friend of mine was talking about what a delicate balance this was, because we're now being honest about our shadows, bringing them out, saying, I have depression, I have anxiety. And then my friend was struggling with what to do with their clients, who then would just get stuck there because now they had something to hold on to that would define their experience. And they would and obviously clinical depression is brain chemistry. You can't do a lot about that. Yet for their folks who did have a little more option at working towards different modalities that would alleviate these mental issues for them, for those people, my friend was saying it was almost crippling to get these diagnoses, because it's like, okay, I'm done. I'm a depressive. That's it. I'm done. And it wasn't that the people were looking for an excuse. It just was a place to rest for this thing that they've struggled against for so long to make sense out of themselves. And finally, it was like, okay, I can bring this out and rest here. And the resting part felt so good that moving forward to maybe make some steps towards something that a person could do to alleviate some of those depressive moments, that was very uncomfortable. But they finally had a comfortable place to rest in the diagnoses and not feel like they had to hide. So, and that's its own space. That's its own space to take that space. And again, please understand, gang, my whole father's side of the family is mental health. So I'm not sitting here saying that people make up depression or they make up, anxiety. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that we are here to balance the code that we've been given. And no matter what the world has told us that we are here to decide what type of experience that we're going to have. And maybe some of that depression and anxiety that a lot of people are experiencing right now, and I see a lot of it through the ethers. A lot of it is not as much brain chemistry as you would be amazed. A lot of it is high millimeter arrays from 5G towers and VLF arrays in the ground at 6 hertz. And we're an interconnected species, and there's almost 8 billion of us, and we're panicking about our planet. How the heck are we not supposed to have a little anxiety and freak out and want to shut down with that? I mean, what is there to look forward into in the world when every day we get up and it's, climate change is going to kill us all, blah. I mean, geez, even the angels are like, hey guys, this is a thing. So understand that watching The Matrix is going to help with all this. And understand, if you are somebody out there who's struggling with depression and with anxiety, and my heart goes out to you, those are rough frickin' roads. And people who struggle with those conditions are not doing it for attention, for who really do. There are people who pretend to struggle with that stuff for attention, but the people who really do struggle with that try to hide it because it's a point of shame and they don't want to bring other people down. So if you have people in your life who have those points of shame in them or those shadows that they don't want to talk about, maybe letting them know that they're not broken and it's okay. And they're probably just very sensitive on top of whatever's going on. Maybe it is chemical. Maybe it's spiritual. Maybe you live on a VLF line. It doesn't matter. But that you hold a space with them to witness their struggle and that it's okay. Because the more we shuck off shame and fear, the less this ascension has to hurt. The less it has to hurt. And sometimes life just is scary, Yet I will tell you going into 2020, gang, that we're going to have a lot of changes. These changes are huge. They're beautiful. And so sit with your inner pieces that you may think aren't as shiny, that you may consider fear. It's okay that they're there. They're trying to tell you how awesome you actually are by comparing the myth to who and what your soul is telling you that you're here to be. And we all know that answer on some level. I've had clients look at me and say, no, I absolutely have no clue what my purpose is. And you give them 10 minutes and pretty soon they're talking about all the things they wish they could do. You are amazing. We are amazing. We're going to get this ascension coding down. We're going to get this manifestation down. And the first practical part of it is expunging the fear and the shame from the shadow portions of the self to realize that we do not have to live afraid of our teachers and that we do not have to live in the same exact matrix as the myth makers that set these ridiculous standards that none of us can match. That's the first step in crossing over into the ascension, is letting go of the old world. All right, gang, watch the Matrix, do your thing, love yourself, and I will see you next week.